I never believed in bedtime stories. They were just stories, something parents told their children to help them fall asleep. But what if the story you're about to hear isn't just a tale? What if, by the time I finish, you'll question whether you've been living in reality at all? It started one night, around 3 a.m. I was in bed, just about to drift off when I heard a faint voice, like a whisper in the dark. "Mom, are you awake?" I jolted up, heart racing. My daughter, Emma, was in her room across the hall. She was 10, a sweet and sensitive girl, not one to sneak into my room at this hour. I thought I must have heard wrong, but then the voice came again, softer this time, like a distant echo. "Mom, wake up please." I crept down the hall, my feet barely touching the cold wooden floor. My hand hesitated on her door, and I pushed it open slowly. Emma wasn't there. I stood frozen in the doorway, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. The room was dark, but it was the bed I noticed first. The blanket was pulled back. Emma always made her bed in the morning, but tonight it was unmade, the way she always left it when she was just a little too tired. I turned on the light. No Emma. But something was off. Her favorite doll was sitting in the middle of the bed, facing the door, as if waiting for me. I don't know why, but that sent a chill down my spine. I checked her closet and under her bed. Empty. I closed the door slowly, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. Then, just as I was about to leave the room, I saw it. On her nightstand, a little note. It wasn't there before. My heart stopped when I read it. "Don't worry, Mommy. I'm safe. I just wanted to say goodnight. Emma." The handwriting was unmistakably hers, but I was sure she hadn't written it. She had been fast asleep in her bed when I went to check on her earlier. I stood there for a long time, unable to breathe, trying to make sense of what was happening. That's when I heard it again. The whisper, just behind me. "Mom, I'm not here." I spun around, my eyes wide with terror. There, in the corner of the room, stood a shadow. It wasn't a person. It was something else. It moved closer, the darkness shifting like it had a form, but no face. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. My body felt frozen. It reached out towards me, cold, as if it wasn't made of flesh, but something far more ancient. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but it was as though my feet were nailed to the floor. Then, the door behind me slammed shut, and I heard Emma's voice again, only it wasn't a voice I recognized. "Mom, you don't understand. I've been here this whole time." I stumbled back, still unable to comprehend what was happening. The whisper became louder, more frantic. "Stop fighting. You can't save her. It's too late." I turned to face the shadow, but it was already gone. The room was still, too still. I rushed out, my heart pounding, and bolted to Emma's room. But when I opened the door, I was greeted with a sight that made my stomach drop. Emma was lying in her bed, fast asleep, just as she should have been. Except she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her, looking directly at me, with unblinking eyes, was another figure, a man, or something that resembled one. His skin was pale, his features twisted and sharp, and he was holding Emma's hand as though she were his. I rushed at Emma, shaking her awake, but when she stirred, she didn't react to me. She didn't recognize me. "Mom," she whispered, her voice distant. "Who's the man sitting with me?" That's when I realized the man wasn't a man at all. It was something else, something far older. It had followed me into my home. I grabbed Emma's hand, pulling her out of bed, but the moment I did, the man, or whatever it was, vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but a lingering coldness in the room. I tried to convince myself it was just a nightmare, some trick of the mind. But every night after that, the same whispers came, and every night, Emma seemed just a little more distant. Days passed, and I began to notice more strange occurrences. Objects would move on their own, strange marks would appear on the walls, and Emma would speak to something invisible that she claimed to see. Her drawings became darker, endless spirals, figures standing in the shadows, eyes watching from the corners of her paper. Then, one evening, I came home to find Emma in the living room, her face pale and expressionless. She was staring at the television, which wasn't on. The static on the screen flickered with strange images. Images of her room, images of me, of my face twisted in terror. "Mom, he's watching us." I felt my stomach drop as I realized it wasn't just the whispers anymore. The thing, The shadow, the man, wasn't content with just being a specter in the background. It was coming for us, and it wasn't stopping. But the worst part wasn't even that. It was the moment I began to hear Emma's voice again, but this time, she wasn't in the house with me. It was coming from my phone. "Mom, don't you see? I've never been here. It's always been me. I've been with you all this time." The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a haunting. It was something far more sinister. Emma had never been real. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. My vision blurred, and I stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. What did that message mean? Emma was real, wasn't she? Of course she had to be. I had raised her, fed her, loved her. But now the voice on the phone, that voice was different. It was cold, detached, almost as if it were mocking me. I slammed the phone down, trying to shake the thought from my mind. This couldn't be happening. I had to focus. I had to get a grip. Emma. Emma was still in her room. She had to be. I rushed upstairs, my heart racing. As I opened her door, I froze. Emma wasn't in her bed, but this time, there was no shadow, no strange figure sitting beside her. Just the eerie silence that filled the room like a suffocating fog. I stepped inside, my footsteps hesitant, as though the room itself was waiting for me to make the wrong move. There, lying on the floor beside the bed, was a small doll, one that Emma had never owned. Its glassy eyes stared at me, its mouth cracked into a twisted smile. I had never seen it before, and yet, I knew it had always been there. It was almost as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. Suddenly, a faint whisper broke the silence. It was coming from the closet. "Mom, come closer. It's time to understand." I turned, my body rigid with fear. The closet door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but a deep, suffocating darkness within. Without thinking, I moved toward it. What else could I do? The whispers were calling me, and despite every bone in my body telling me to turn away, I couldn't resist. As I reached the doorway, something icy brushed against my skin. I froze, feeling an overwhelming pressure, as if the darkness inside was pulling me in. "Mom, why do you think I've been so quiet lately?" I heard Emma's voice again, but it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from inside the closet. I haven't been real because I never was. My mind scrambled for answers. The pieces weren't fitting together. How could this be happening? How could we have missed something so wrong? I stepped into the closet, and the world seemed to fold in on itself. The walls of the closet closed around me, stretching further and further. The darkness was no longer a physical thing. It was a presence, a weight in the air, pressing down on me. Then I saw her. Not Emma, but something wearing her face. The girl in front of me was standing in the middle of a field, the wind howling around her, though there were no trees, no ground, just emptiness. I tried to speak, to reach out to her, but the words wouldn't come. My chest tightened, and I felt like I was suffocating. She looked at me, her eyes empty. "Why did you have to keep me?" she whispered. "Why did you bring me here?" I want to scream, but my mouth wouldn't work. I could only watch as she stepped forward. Each movement was like a slow crawl through a nightmare, unfathomably wrong, unsettling. And then she smiled, a smile that wasn't Emma's, a smile that was twisted, malformed, like something not quite human. "You never really saw me," she said, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "I've always been here waiting, but you weren't ready yet." And in that moment, I understood. Emma wasn't mine. She had never been mine. She was a part of something else, something ancient and far darker than I could have ever imagined. And she was never supposed to be in this world. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely a sound. Her smile grew wider, too wide, until her face almost seemed to stretch beyond human limits. "I'm what you've been hearing all along. I'm the story you've been trying to deny. You just didn't know it yet." My head was spinning. My thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound behind me, like a soft laugh. I spun around. The man, the shadow, he was there, but now I could see him clearly. His eyes were hollow, endless pits of darkness, and his grin stretched too wide for his face. He wasn't a figure of the past. He was here, in this reality now. "You should have listened," he murmured, stepping forward. "You thought she was your daughter. You thought this was all just a bad dream, a nightmare. But it's not." I backed away slowly, but the closer I got to the closet door, the further it seemed to stretch. I couldn't escape. And then, the man spoke again, his voice now a low growl. "You were never meant to wake up. You weren't supposed to remember." Suddenly, the darkness around me shifted, and I was no longer standing in the closet. I was back in the living room, staring at Emma, who was still sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. But this time, her face wasn't right. Her eyes were vacant, her expression cold. I took a step toward her, and in a flash, I saw what I had been missing all along. It wasn't her. The girl sitting in front of me wasn't Emma. It was something wearing her skin. It had always been something else. And that was when I realized there was no escape. I was the one who'd been trapped all along. I staggered back, my breath shallow, my heart thundering in my chest. The room spun around me. The walls seemed to close in, and the world felt wrong. But it was real. This was real. I blinked, trying to clear my mind, but when I opened my eyes, the girl on the couch was no longer sitting still. She was standing, slowly, unnaturally, like a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. The thing that wore Emma's face stared at me, its eyes now wide open, devoid of any warmth or humanity. Its lips curved into a grin that stretched impossibly wide, much like the Shadow Man's grin, the one I'd seen in the closet. "You should have never woken up," it whispered, its voice a hollow echo of Emma's. "You're not ready for this." I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't move. They felt like they were rooted to the floor, as though the very air around me was thick with something dark and suffocating. The thing that wasn't Emma began to move toward me, its footsteps slow, deliberate. The sound of its approach was deafening, each step resonating with an eerie finality. I wanted to scream, to beg for it to stop, but my throat was dry, my body paralyzed with fear. This wasn't my daughter. This wasn't the girl I had raised and loved for all these years. The real Emma was long gone. I turned my head, desperately searching for anything that might offer me an escape, but the room had changed. The walls, once familiar, were now covered in shifting shadows. The furniture seemed to warp and bend, as though the entire space was being distorted by something not of this world. And then, I heard the whisper again, coming from behind me. "You're too late. You're all too late." It was the Shadow Man's voice, the one that had haunted me, taunted me, ever since the moment I'd heard that voicemail. I spun around, desperate to face the source of the voice, but when I did, the room was empty. The thing that wore Emma's face was gone. I was alone, or so I thought. The shadows on the walls began to shift again, swirling together in a dark vortex. The air grew heavier, pressing down on me with a suffocating weight. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, and then, out of the darkness, a figure appeared. It was Emma, or at least, it looked like her, but something was different. She wasn't the same girl who had played with me in the backyard or laughed at my bad jokes. This Emma was cold, empty. Her eyes locked onto mine, but there was nothing in them. No soul, no life. "Why do you keep trying?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of blood in my ears. "You can't save me. You never could." I took a step back, my legs trembling beneath me. The shadows pressed closer until I felt as though I was standing in the center of a storm. The world around me was spinning, warping, as though reality itself was beginning to unravel. And then, I heard the truth I had refused to accept all along. The voice, the Shadow Man's voice, cut through the chaos. "You were never meant to save her. You were meant to be the next one." The words hit me like a wave crashing into shore, pulling me under, drowning me in their weight. I fought to keep my footing, but it was no use. My mind, my very sense of self, was beginning to unravel, just like the reality around me. The truth was simple, yet so horrifying it tore at the very fabric of my being. I had never been the mother. I had never been the one in control. I had been the replacement. Everything I knew, everything I thought I knew, had been a lie. The girl who had been wearing Emma's face, the one who had called me mom, had never been Emma at all. She had been something else, something ancient, a creature that fed off the lives of those who tried to rescue it. And I had fallen for it. The air around me thickened, the darkness deepened, and I realized with chilling clarity, I was trapped. No one would ever find me. No one would ever know the truth. And the thing that wore Emma's face would continue on, finding its next victim, weaving its twisted web of deception, as it always had. And as for me, I would become just another shadow, another forgotten memory, swallowed by the darkness. The final twist, the one that would haunt me for eternity, was that I had never escaped. I had been the one who was never meant to leave. The phone rang again. This time, the voice on the other end wasn't cold. It was warm, familiar. "Mom, where are you?" Emma's voice. But this time, it wasn't a question. It was an invitation. And I knew, without a doubt, I would answer it.